Mark Scanlon here with PFA. Just wanted to review with all of you the smaller end of our product line on the KOR-LOK Side-Action systems. It seems to me a lot of people are not fully in tune, shall we say, with just how small these units are and just how powerful they are for their small size. So we got together hydraulic cylinders, some heads, and a few KOR-LOK Side-Action systems for discussion. Now, focusing in on the small KOR-LOK Side-Action system, the KOR-LOK Mini we call it. It's pretty new, the last couple years, had it out. KL70 is the actual designation. Here we see it sitting next to a pen, and it just really tries to provide the feel for just how small it is. It's right on top there. It's very tiny. I can hold this in my hand. It's just a very small unit, very small size. That puts out 8,000 pounds of preload force, so like 4 tons of preload force. That is amazing in that little size. Particularly important is because it's so narrow, we can nestle it in amongst other cylinders and create that huge output force on some small core pins that are close to each other, but still with a fairly good area of exposure to plastic, which is the point. In a lot of molds, we have very small, tiny pins, but those pins maybe go up from a 1/4 inch, and they might get up to a 1/2 inch or an inch in diameter, and maybe they don't have a seal off, and they're actually exposed to plastic pressure, and that can be quite a bit of force. A 1-inch area pin exposed to, let's say, 10 to 20,000 pounds of force, PSI that is, of plastic pressure, could then create maybe 10,000, 20,000 pounds of force back onto a cylinder or a slide or a heel block or something like that. So these cylinders come in very handy for those what seems to be a smaller area of plastic pressure exposure, which is really a much larger, in reality, pressure. These can very easily take care of that in a very small size. So this KLH70, having 8,000 pounds of preload force at the end of stroke, is roughly equivalent to something that would be like a 2.5 inch diameter cylinder. So this would be the head for that. And we can see that this cylinder, actually, the body of the cylinder would fit inside the tube that runs for this 2.5 inch bore hydraulic cylinder. That gives you a feel. So if you're thinking about, I'm used to 2.5 inch bore hydraulic cylinders, put them on my mold all the time, how does this look relative to that? Very small, much smaller. So please consider the Mini for a lot of those smaller cores that you really want to pull anytime during the mold cycle. You want to nestle in somewhere, pull at a weird angle. This is the cylinder for you. Now let's say you need a little bit more force to hold back the pressure, and you want to get up to something like a 75 series, which is 12,000 pounds of preload force. Not that much bigger. A comparable hydraulic cylinder would be something like this, a 4-inch bore hydraulic, something that big, 4-inch bore hydraulic there to create that kind of force. And again, those just create pressure, but they don't lock it in and lock that preload in during injection where the pressure may drop. So, but it gives you a feel where if you start looking at hydraulic cylinders and saying, hey, maybe I'll put a 4-inch bore on there, that'll do the job. Why don't we put on a KLH75? Much smaller, fits in that smaller space. Again, easy to control, easy to dial in that preload, locks it in, maintains that during injection, so the part comes out perfect. Just because we had one available, I threw in here is a 112 series, 100 and 112. They're very similar. They're in the same size body. The 100 series has a little bit smaller locking mechanism in it. It has the ability to then have a smaller end on it right here, with, again, a little bit smaller space. So we came up with the 100 as sort of we have some large bore cylinders which have larger bore areas on them. This is kind of the large bore version of a 112, where we have a little smaller rod, a little smaller preload force, but it can have a little more pull force. So in most applications, you don't need much pull force, but if you get into die casting or a deep penetration in the part, we'd like to consider then how much shrinkage might be around the part. We might want to go with a large bore, bolt a large bore on the back of these cylinders so we can pull it out. Not really common, but happens. So there's our KOR-LOK series. The smallest size is the 75 mini and the 75 and the 100, and some comparison to just how small they are and how much awesome performance they have on your molds.